A woman kills the men she loves, and for years, no one suspects a thing. It's the stuff of nightmares. No one can imagine someone close to them being capable of murder. But when Lynn Turner's two husbands die under suspicious circumstances, the truth about her dark past begins to surface. What would drive a woman to kill, and how did she escape suspicion for so long? In March of 1995, Glenn Turner, a man full of promise, suddenly falls ill. After being treated for flu-like symptoms, he dies unexpectedly. The cause? Natural causes, or so everyone thought. But the truth was much darker. Over the course of years, Lynn Turner would kill again. How could someone get away with such cold-blooded acts, even when they are close to their victims? What allowed Lynn Turner to slip through the cracks for so long? Lynn Turner's life didn't begin as a picture of happiness. Born Lynn Marie Womack, her first moments on Earth were filled with uncertainty. Abandoned by her biological mother, Lynn was adopted shortly after birth by the Womack family. This should have been the fresh start she needed, a new chapter in a better life. But instead, her story took a darker turn. At just 5 years old, Lynn's life was uprooted once again. Her adoptive parents, Helen and her husband D.L. Gregory, divorced. And while Helen remarried soon after, the new family dynamic wasn't one that Lynn could fit into. She never got along with her stepfather, and the tension in their home was palpable. As Lynn grew older, the emotional scars from her unstable childhood only deepened. The constant upheaval, the neglect, and the feeling of being unloved led her to act out. By her teenage years, she began to rebel, and her relationship with her mother became increasingly strained. Lynn's rebellious behavior spiraled into something far more dangerous. Struggling with substance abuse, she found herself in and out of rehab. By the time she was in her late teens, she was admitted to a clinic in Atlanta for drug problems. The turmoil within her was becoming too much to handle, and her struggles were becoming visible to those around her. Despite these challenges, Lynn eventually managed to put together some semblance of a life. In the early 1990s, she found herself working as a 911 dispatcher in Cobb County, Georgia. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a stable job, and for someone like Lynn, stability seemed like a rare commodity. Lynn wasn't done, though. She had bigger dreams. Desperate for respect and a sense of purpose, she took the police exam and applied to become an officer. However, her attempts to join the force were thwarted when she failed her psychological evaluation. The cracks in her psyche were more than just visible, they were glaring. But Lynn's heart was set on one thing. She wanted to be loved. She wanted to be in control of her own destiny, and she believed that finding the right man would be the key to unlocking the life she dreamed of. Little did she know, this would be the beginning of her dark descent. By the early 1990s, fate stepped in when Lynn met Glenn Turner, a Cobb County police officer. Glenn was everything Lynn thought she needed. Stable, kind-hearted, and reliable. For a while he seemed to be the perfect match, and their relationship moved quickly. But Lynn, with her emotional baggage and turbulent past, wasn't able to keep the relationship simple. Soon after their wedding in 1992, cracks began to show in the marriage. Glenn was working long hours as a police officer, and Lynn, feeling neglected and unable to control her own emotions, began to spiral once more. The tension built. The relationship, once full of promise, started to unravel, but at first it seemed like a typical marital struggle, a couple facing the challenges of life. It didn't take long for Lynn to feel trapped. She was living a life that didn't match the one she had envisioned. Glenn's job required him to work long hours, and Lynn's growing dependence on him and the instability in their relationship started to take a toll. Their marriage became a battleground. Could Lynn's tragic past have driven her to her fate, or was her dark path a result of choices she made along the way? What do you think? Was she a product of her upbringing, or could she have chosen a different life? On the other side of the story, Glenn Turner's life stood in stark contrast to Lynn's chaotic childhood. Born and raised in the quiet, rural town of Forsyth County, Georgia, Glenn came from a family that valued integrity, hard work, and responsibility. His parents, though not wealthy, made sure to raise him with a strong sense of morality and the belief that life was about serving others. Glenn was a man who believed in fairness and kindness, a pillar in his community. As he got older, Glenn followed in his father's footsteps and joined the Georgia State Patrol. Glenn's dedication to his job quickly earned him a reputation as someone reliable, committed to making his community a safer place. He was a quiet but respected figure, someone his peers could trust in times of need. Whether on duty or off, Glenn had a sense of justice that drove everything he did. His job wasn't just a career, it was his calling. But Glenn's personal life wasn't as smooth as his professional one. In 1992, Glenn married Lynn Womack, a woman who, on the surface, seemed to offer the companionship he was seeking. For a time, their life together appeared to be the perfect blend of romance and stability. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Glenn, a man who spent much of his life helping others, now found himself struggling to fix his own marriage. As the years passed, the relationship began to deteriorate. Lynn, unable to curb her financial problems and excessive spending habits, put increasing pressure on Glenn. While he worked multiple jobs to support them, Lynn's lack of financial responsibility strained their home life. Tension began to mount between them, and their once blissful marriage turned cold. Eventually, the two were living separate lives under one roof. The once loving couple was now sleeping in different rooms, their intimacy and communication nearly gone. Glenn began to talk about divorce, but the burden of it all weighed heavily on him. He was not the type to give up easily, but something in their relationship had broken that he couldn't fix. But fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Before Glenn could follow through on his plans to end the marriage, something terrible happened. In early 1995, Glenn began to feel ill. He complained of flu-like symptoms, eventually seeking medical attention. After a brief stay at the hospital, he was sent home, only to die suddenly the next day. The official cause of death was an irregular heartbeat, and to most it seemed like a tragic but natural event. However, those who knew Glenn best, his friends, his colleagues, weren't convinced. For the people closest to Glenn, the doubts didn't dissipate easily. While the death was officially ruled a natural cause, those who knew Glenn were left with unsettling questions. How could a man who was in seemingly perfect health die so suddenly? Was it really just an irregular heartbeat, or was there something darker at play? As whispers of suspicion began to circulate, the seeds of doubt were sown. Seeds that would, in time, reveal a far more sinister truth. Was Glenn's death truly just a tragic coincidence? Or did something more sinister lie beneath the surface? Could a man like Glenn really have been taken down by someone close to him? What do you think happened? Randy Thompson, Lynn Turner's second victim, grew up in Warner Robins, Georgia, in a family that embodied hard work and perseverance. His parents taught him the values of responsibility and caring for others. Randy followed in his own way, dedicating himself to a life of service as a firefighter in Forsyth County. Known for his strength, courage, and compassion, Randy earned the respect of those around him. He wasn't just a firefighter, he was a man whose heart was as big as his biceps. But Randy's greatest attribute, his caring nature, also made him vulnerable. In 1999, Randy met Lynn Womack, a woman who appeared to be recovering from the death of her first husband, Glenn Turner. What Randy didn't know was that Lynn's history was anything but what it seemed. Lynn had recently buried Glenn, and in the aftermath of her husband's death, she sought solace in Randy. Their relationship quickly became an affair, and Randy, unaware of her dark past, was drawn into her web. After Glenn's death, Lynn moved in with Randy. To the outside world, it appeared as though Lynn had found a fresh start, a new chance at happiness. But behind closed doors, their relationship was strained. While Randy, a dedicated firefighter, was focused on his career and family, Lynn's financial problems became an ever-present source of tension. She spent lavishly, often buying luxury items and indulging in a lifestyle far beyond what their income could support. By 2001, Randy had reached his breaking point. He began to talk about ending his relationship with Lynn. Her financial irresponsibility, coupled with the growing distance between them, left him exhausted and disillusioned. He was ready to walk away, but before he could put his plans into action, something inexplicable happened. Just like Glenn Turner before him, Randy began to fall ill. He complained of flu-like symptoms, weakness, and fatigue. Despite seeking medical help, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Lynn, always attentive, made sure he received care, but the truth was more insidious. Before Randy could confront Lynn, or follow through on his plans, he died under mysterious circumstances, in the summer of 2001. The cause of death? Initially, it was attributed to a viral infection, but as with Glenn, suspicion began to bubble beneath the surface, and whispers of foul play began to spread. Randy's sudden death left a cloud of uncertainty hanging over those who knew him best. How could a man so healthy, so full of life, be taken so suddenly? Friends and family members began to question what had really happened, and just like Glenn's death before him, suspicion started to creep in. But Lynn, ever the actress, played the role of the grieving partner, convincingly fooling everyone around her, or so it seemed. How could someone as strong as Randy Thompson fall for Lynn's manipulation? Did his caring nature blind him to the warning signs? Was his fate sealed the moment he crossed paths with her? It was the summer of 2001 when Randy Thompson began to feel unwell. He complained of flu-like symptoms, weakness, nausea, and fatigue, symptoms that seemed ordinary enough, especially during the change in seasons. Thinking it was nothing more than a viral infection, Randy went to the emergency room, where he was treated and sent home. But things took a tragic turn. Randy never woke up. When Randy's family was informed of his death, the initial cause was ruled as a natural occurrence, most likely the result of a viral infection. But for those who knew Randy, this diagnosis didn't sit right. He was a healthy man, strong and full of life. How could he have just gone? The family's suspicion was strong enough to demand further investigation, and this time, they would get the truth. The second autopsy revealed a shocking truth. Randy Thompson had been poisoned. But the poison wasn't just any toxic substance. It was ethylene glycol, the deadly chemical commonly found in antifreeze. This rare and subtle poison is often used in cases of poisoning, but it's incredibly difficult to detect unless the right tests are performed. Lynn Turner had learned from her first crime. With Glenn, she had slipped under the radar, but with Randy, she covered her tracks with even greater precision. Antifreeze poisoning was difficult to detect at first, but once the toxin was identified, investigators quickly linked it to Glenn Turner's death as well. It was the same method, the same poison. This wasn't just a coincidence.
At first, investigators suspected the fire might have been accidental, maybe a malfunctioning appliance or a tragic misstep. But as they sifted through the ashes, it quickly became clear that something much more sinister had occurred. The bodies of Keith, Jennifer, and the children were discovered inside the house. All of them lifeless before the flames even had a chance to do their damage. And the most chilling detail, the fire itself seemed too perfect, too precise, as if it had been set deliberately, not by the unpredictable nature of an accident, but by someone who knew exactly what they were doing.
What was chilling about this discovery wasn't just the poison. It was the realization that Lynn had killed before and gotten away with it. She had learned how to cover her tracks, how to fool the doctors, how to make it seem like an accident, and for a time it worked. But the question remained, why? What would drive a woman to poison two men who loved her? What made Lynn Turner so cold? How did Lynn manage to use such a subtle and clever method of murder? And what gave her the confidence to do it twice? What motivated her to go so far? With Randy Thompson's death now under suspicion, the investigation into his mysterious passing quickly expanded to encompass Glenn Turner's death. What had once been written off as natural causes now appeared eerily connected. Detectives, piecing together the evidence, started to form a chilling conclusion. Lynn Turner had poisoned both men. The method was identical, ethylene glycol, a substance so subtle that it had been overlooked for years. The motive behind Lynn's actions was as dark as the poison she used: financial gain. After Glenn's death, Lynn had collected a significant life insurance payout. She had always been the beneficiary, and the money from his death gave her the cushion she needed to move on with her life. But once she grew dissatisfied with Randy and his financial resources, she killed him too, just as easily. The question became, how had she gotten away with it for so long? Lynn's ability to deceive was not just a matter of luck. It was a calculated strategy. She had played the role of the grieving widow and girlfriend so convincingly that no one suspected a thing. Both Glenn and Randy had trusted her, loved her, and provided for her. And when they became inconvenient, when they stood in the way of her desires, she simply eliminated them. But despite her careful planning, Lynn made a fatal mistake. She didn't expect to be caught. As detectives delved deeper into the case, it became increasingly clear that Lynn's motive wasn't just financial. There was also a bitter element of revenge. She had become disillusioned with both men, Glenn for not meeting her material demands, and Randy for threatening to end their relationship. She needed control, and when she realized she could no longer manipulate them, she took drastic action. But even her meticulous planning couldn't prevent the inevitable. By this point, the investigation had begun to gain traction. The authorities had pieced together the clues to life insurance, similar causes of death, and a method of murder that was as rare as it was effective. Lynn's past had caught up with her, and as detectives traced her movements and relationships, it was clear she had nowhere to run. The question remained, how had she gotten away with it for so long? Lynn's ability to evade justice for so many years can be attributed to her calm and methodical demeanor. She had carefully crafted a persona that made her appear innocent and vulnerable. After all, who would suspect the grieving widow or the heartbroken girlfriend? But beneath that facade, she was a calculating murderer who had been living with her dark secret for far too long. What made Lynn so confident that she could escape justice after killing 2 people? Was it her calm demeanor that threw everyone off? Or was there something deeper at play? Could she have been stopped earlier? After years of careful investigation, Lynn Turner was finally arrested in 2007. The case that had stunned a community and eluded justice for so long was about to reach its chilling conclusion. The trial that followed was nothing short of explosive. Detailed forensic evidence, toxicology reports, and the link between the deaths of both men pointed directly at Lynn. Yet, in a shocking display of defiance, she maintained her innocence throughout the proceedings, even as the evidence mounted against her. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, using the toxicology reports, the matching causes of death, and the life insurance payouts as irrefutable proof that Lynn had carefully planned and executed the murders of both Glenn Turner and Randy Thompson. But despite the overwhelming evidence, Lynn's defense was adamant she wasn't guilty. Lynn's defense team argued that the deaths of both Glenn and Randy were simply tragic accidents. They suggested that there was insufficient proof that Lynn had poisoned her husbands, and that perhaps the cause of death was related to natural or undetermined causes. But the jury was not swayed. After deliberating for hours, the jury returned their verdict: guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Lynn Turner was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families of Glenn Turner and Randy Thompson, justice had finally been served. But for Lynn, the trial was just the beginning of another chapter. Though she had been sentenced to life behind bars, her story was far from over. In August 2010, after spending several years in prison, Lynn Turner's life came to a tragic end. Authorities reported that she had taken her own life, overdosing on prescription medication. The circumstances surrounding her death raised questions. Was it truly a suicide, or had something darker been at play? Lynn's death in prison closed the final chapter of her dark and twisted story. For many, it was a reminder that even the most carefully concealed secrets will eventually surface. But for the families of Glenn and Randy, Lynn's death left more unanswered questions that may never be resolved. Was Lynn's death in prison truly an act of self-destruction, or did she have something to hide that she took with her to the grave? Could justice have been served differently if she had lived longer? And what does her story tell us about the nature of deception? Lynn Turner's story is one of tragedy, manipulation, and cold-blooded murder. But it's also a story about the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places, sometimes right under our noses. It serves as a chilling reminder that we must be vigilant, even with those we trust the most. How can someone so seemingly ordinary harbor such a dark secret? How could a woman who seemed so normal, who loved and was loved, become a killer? Lynn's story raises uncomfortable questions. What would drive someone to kill twice, especially someone they claimed to love? Was it revenge, financial gain, or something deeper, something more ingrained in the fabric of her troubled past? Was it the pain of abandonment, the scars from her childhood, that pushed her to murder? Or was this darkness always inside of her, waiting for the right moment to surface? The chilling truth is that Lynn Turner was able to hide her darkness for years. She deceived those closest to her, played the role of a grieving widow and moved from one victim to the next, each time covering her tracks with deadly precision. But in the end, the truth came to light, and justice was served. However, as with many cases of betrayal and murder, the scars left behind are impossible to erase. But the question lingers, could this have been prevented? Could someone have seen the warning signs earlier, before Lynn's darkness took root and led to 2 innocent lives lost? And what about her victims? Glenn Turner and Randy Thompson both trusted the woman who would ultimately betray them. Just how far can we truly know the people in our lives? Lynn Turner's tragic end in prison doesn't change the lives that were lost. It doesn't undo the pain, the heartbreak, or the loss felt by the families of Glenn and Randy. But it does serve as a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones closest to us, and that we must never stop questioning, never stop seeking the truth. What do you think? Was Lynn Turner a victim of her circumstances, or was she always destined for this path? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe someone can truly escape the darkness of their past, or does it define them forever? This has been the chilling story of Lynn Turner, a woman who took the lives of the men she loved and managed to hide her secrets for years. But in the end, justice always finds a way to reveal the truth, no matter how deeply it's buried. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories. _and Safa Lip. Us know your thoughts on Lynn Turner's case in the comments below.